bubble. So,
Got the bubbles good. You want all that? Okay.
well, definitely universal. Definitely universal.
Oh, yeah. That's
She sees more.
You see this?
All set, Mr. Raiden.
How about the sound system? You check that out?
It's all ready to go. I don't know where you got your sound effects, but you'd swear a bomb was exploding. I mean a big bomb.
Precisely the way it's supposed to sound.
That about do it, Mr. Raiden?
That about does it.
You've got quite a setup here. This part of the illusion, too?
No, this room is not an illusion.
I venture to guess that it's the best designed bomb shelter on the face of the earth. Who knows?
The hydrogen bomb is not an illusion.
But tonight it's for gags, huh?
Something of the sort. A practical joke, let's say.
Oh, you can say that again. But when they start those sound effects scoring and that stuff on the screen, you'd swear the whole world was getting blasted.
No, that's a general idea. I have 3 guests coming this evening. Rather special guests.
You did all this to fool 3 of your friends? Must be kind of special friends.
They are indeed very special friends.
What you have just looked at takes place 300 feet underground, beneath the basement of a New York City skyscraper. It's owned and lived in by one Paul Raiden. Mr. Raiden is rich, eccentric, and single-minded. How rich we can already perceive. How eccentric and single-minded we shall see in a moment. Because all of you have just entered the Twilight Zone.
Good evening, Fred. Just step across the hall to the door straight ahead of you. Please come in if you will. Down. Make yourselves comfortable. Please sit down. How good of you to come. Colonel Hawthorne, Mr. Hughes, Mrs. Langsford.
It's Raiden, isn't it? Aren't you Paul Raiden?
You have an excellent memory, Reverend. And you, Colonel, do you recognize me?
I believe I do. Served under me once, didn't you, Raiden?
I did indeed. 2nd Lieutenant Infantry Regiment under your command, Africa, 1942.
I recall it vaguely. I seem to recall something else, too.
Well, it's not surprising it all doesn't flood back to you. After all, you had a few thousand men under you, a few thousand cogs. I was only one of them. But then again, you didn't court-martial all of them, Colonel. That distinction you reserved for me.
Ah, yes. I do recall. You refused to lead an assault on a hill. Refused in the face of a direct order. The delay cost us almost a company of men.
That was your contention to the court-martial board, and so I was stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged.
You were fortunate, Mr. Raiden. Were I to have been able to dictate the sentence, I would have had you shot.
I'm sure you would have. Colonel, I am sure you would have. But what a wretched host I am, to neglect the lady present, Mrs. Langsford. Do you recall who I am?
Of course I do, Paul. I taught you in high school. I don't forget my students. Oh, sometimes the names and the faces get confused, but if I prod my memory, I usually can connect the name and a face. And in your case, a character.
You flunked me, Mrs. Langsford. Dressed me down before an entire class, called me names, humiliated me. But let me say again how good of you to come. I'm delighted you accepted the invitation.
Invitation? The request that I come here was more in the form of an ultimatum. Your chauffeur, or whoever it was, said something about it being a matter of life and death.
Well, yes, indeed. That's the way it was broached to me. I was having my dinner, and my wife, Mary, went to answer the door, and when she came back, she had such a strange expression on her face.
Ah, Mr. Hughes, you've never ceased to be a bit on the woody side now, have you? It's odd, really, how changeless we remain over the years. But then again, I suppose certain lifetime habits are not easily put aside.
Paul, perhaps you'd be good enough to tell us why we've been asked to come here.
I'd be delighted to. But first, can I get you something? Highball, perhaps. Or a cup of coffee, Reverend. How do you take your coffee? Habits, Mrs. Langsford. The incredible persistence of habits. You call me Paul. As if I were still sitting in the front row in your classroom. But what about you, Mrs. Langsford? A nice cup of tea.
Thank you, no.
Oh. How about you, Colonel? A tot of rum, perhaps?
I would be deeply appreciative, Mr. Radin, if you made your point, and then let us leave. You've obviously called us here for something, and I, for one, would welcome hearing whatever it is.
How staunchly military, Colonel. Drive, drive, drive. Get up against that objective and wipe it out. Red flag in the map and troops out of the hot sun. The nerves of steel and the concrete head.
That will be all, Radin.
May I remind you, Colonel, that you are no longer in command. I'm in command here, and what I command at this moment is your attention. I called you three here for a very specific purpose. I want to settle 3 old scores. But we'll do it in chronology. My dear old school mom shall begin. That staunch and intrepid educator that looked so out of place without her severe spectacles, covering severe eyes, looking out of a severe face, and possessing that vast prerogative that comes from the local school board, and the vast courage that comes with pitting all her wits and instinct and knowledge against captive children.
Are you finished, Paul?
My dear school mom, I've hardly begun.
Well, then may I make an observation? Just a comment on how incredible this whole thing is. That a man like you, a millionaire 3 times over, an important man, walks with kings and heads of state and industrial tycoons. That such a man should have a mind so tiny that it could brood over a high school incident of 20 years ago and let it fester inside you as you seem to have done.
I've never liked humiliation, whether it happened 20 years ago or in the past 10 minutes.
Humiliation. All right, Paul, let's talk about humiliation. Let's talk about your humiliation. Mr. Radin was caught cheating in an examination. Not a crime, of course, but perhaps a bit indicative of the character of the person who does it. And when he was accused of this act, this cocoon, soon to become tycoon, tried to plant his crib sheets on an innocent student. How right you are, Mr. Radin, that I stood you up on your feet, and in front of the entire class I told you exactly what you were.
But no room was there then, Mrs. Langsford, for a moment of compassion, for an iota of sympathy for a poor, frightened, desperate boy.
Mr. Radin, I've dealt with frightened and desperate children all my life, and it may surprise you to know that I've lent them more of sympathy and of compassion than I've lent them of knowledge. But neither sympathy nor compassion can be handed out wholesale like cheap bubble gum. The recipient must be worthy of them. And you never were. You were a devious, dishonest troublemaker. And in spite of all your millions, It's my guess you are still devious, you are still dishonest, and I've no doubt, even now, you're a troublemaker.
You haven't changed, Mrs. Langsford.
Mr. Raiden, obviously many years have passed between now and the time you felt you'd suffered indignities at our hands. But what's to be gained by...
Great deal can be gained, Reverend, a very great deal. You, for example, accused me of a lack of character, put a scandal over my head, destroyed my reputation.
Yes, I remember. A girl, Mr. Raiden. A girl you drove to suicide. Because even at that early stage, you were not the man who held honor in very high regard.
You can go to the devil, Reverend. Raiden! And you too, Colonel. Tonight, my friends, you will all go to the devil, and that is not a figure of speech. Do you know why I built this room down here? Those walls are 18 inches concrete with reinforced steel, and around them, 6 inches of lead. I have my own generator system, my own air system. Yes, and out there, beyond that door, a storeroom the size of a warehouse. You understand logistics, Colonel. Does it occur to you why I should have gone to all this trouble and expense? To begin a vigil, my friends, the long wait and the countdown. Yes, I have walked with kings and tycoons, as you perceive, Mrs. Langsford. I have walked with them and I have listened to them. I keep abreast of the times and usually well ahead of them. I know things that are going to happen. I pay for the service. 48 hours ago, I received the most interesting bit of news, something that perhaps only 6 men in the world know of. The world is coming to an end this evening, ladies and gentlemen. At 11:45, there will be no more city, no more country. At 30 minutes after midnight, there will be no more world. They are going to bomb us, and we are going to bomb them. By dawn, there will be nothing left but rubble and bodies. And in a few moments, it will all begin. You'll be hearing sirens very shortly. That's the red alert. That means their missiles are on their way. Ours will follow soon after.
And you are to survive, Mr. Raiden? Is that the idea?
I am to survive, Mr. Hughes. I am 300 feet underground. And what about you, Reverend? Do you wish to survive? Do the rest of you wish to survive? Or am I to be the only pallbearer?
This is your Civil Defense announcer. Repeating. The Air Defense Command has just declared a take cover signal. This is not a practice warning, not a drill. An attack by enemy forces is expected at any moment. You must seek the nearest shelter immediately. If you are in your home, go to your prepared shelter or to the basement. If you have no shelter or basement, go toward the center of the house, to the first room or hall that will put as many walls as possible between you and the outside of the house. Take your radio with you. If you are in any other type of building, go to the basement or lowest floor and get as close to the center of the building as possible. Your shelter until told it is safe to do so. This is not a test. This is a real take cover.
Comments? Perhaps a little military sophistry now, Colonel. A quote from General Grant. Or you, Reverend. Something enriching from the gospel. Such silence, Mrs. Langsford. Nothing that vast repertoire, that Pilgrim's Progress mind of yours to handle the situation, or mentally erase her to wipe out reality.
I've got to get to my wife.
By all means, Reverend, get to your wife. Hold hands and die together. You turn my stomach, Mr. Hughes. Get to your wife. That's not what's on your mind. What's on your mind is what's on the Colonel's mind. It's Truman's mind. What precious hide, your sanctified flesh. That's what preoccupies you at the moment.
If I'm to die tonight, I want to be with someone I love.
Somebody I love. How theatrical, but more burlesque than legitimate. Have the decency, Reverend, to depart this earth with just a fragment of the truth in your mouth. Tell me to my face that you're so scared, so miserably frightened that you'd sell your wife by the pound if it meant your own survival.
If those were the last words I spoke before I died, they would also be the worst falsehood I ever uttered on earth. Now, will you open this door? Will you let me leave now?
How did you know, Raiden? How could you possibly have known?
What difference does it make? If you'll let us leave now, perhaps we can reach our homes before it happens.
My dear friend, shall we drop the pretenses now? Shall we all of us now tell the truth? I told you how this room was constructed. Steel, concrete, and lead. It may be the only place on earth where you can survive. Now, what is this nonsense about going back to your homes? Do you mean to say that you would walk out of here and die, when by simply sitting here you could live?
Are we to understand, Mr. Raiden, that you will permit us this luxury? You will allow us to stay?
Of course, Colonel. As a matter of fact, it's precisely why I've asked you to come. Each of you in his own way has tried to destroy me. But I'll not repay the compliment. That is to say, I will not require an eye for an eye, nothing as primitive or as naked as that.
What is your price, Mr. Raiden? I'd be interested.
The Colonel would be interested. I presume the Reverend and the schoolmarm would be interested. I submit, dear friends, you're not just interested, it's probably the only thing in God's earth that has any meaning left at all. But the price, Colonel. You will beg my pardon. You will ask my forgiveness. And if need be, you will get down on your hands and knees to perform the function.
Pretty pleased with sugar on it.
How's that? Speak up, teacher.
Pretty pleased with sugar on it. It's what children say. To exact a favor. I don't want your favor, Mr. Raiden. Let me out of here. If I'm to spend my last quarter hour on earth, I'd rather spend it with a stray cat. Or alone in Central Park. Or in a city full of strangers whose names I'll never know.
The door, Raiden. Will you open the door now?
Open up! Raiden.
You're too blind or you're too stupid because none of you seem to understand. All you have to do, literally all you have to do, is to say a sentence. Just a string of silly, stupid words like a command, Colonel, or like a lesson teacher, or like a prayer, Reverend. All you have to say is you're sorry. All right, you want to die? Fine. But you'll be back inside 5 minutes. There's the elevator. Take it. Take the farce to its conclusion. Go up into the street and see the panic and the frenzy of the horror, and then come back down here to your salvation. Or you can watch it all down here on that screen. You can see it all happen, the whole thing. Watch the world being shoveled into a grave. It's your last chance. It's your last chance. I mean it. Tell me, Reverend, is life so stinking cheap that you could throw it down a drain?
Life is very dear, Mr. Raiden. Infinitely valuable. But there are other things that come even higher. Honor is one of them. Perhaps the most expensive of them all.
Amen.
Try not to get too lonely, Mr. Raiden. Use mirrors. They may help. Put them all around the room. Then you'll have the company of a world full of Raidens. It'll be a fantasy, of course, but then your whole life has been a fantasy. A parade of illusions. Illusions about what people have done to you. Illusions about what justice is. Illusions about what is the dignity of even the lowest of us. A fantasy, Mr. Raiden, And now you can have it all to yourself.
No, it's not true. It's not a fantasy.
No, it's not a fantasy!
This is your civil defense announcer. Our military authorities have just ordered a take cover alert. Attack by enemy forces is imminent. Take cover immediately. You're in your car driving away from your city. Continue. Keep on driving. Do not stop. When movement is no longer possible, seek the best available refuge.
That's enough!
If you're outdoors on foot, hurry to the nearest shelter.
Hey, Mac. Mac. That little bit too much? Hey, Mac.
I didn't want it this way.
Let me take you home, Mac.
I didn't want it this way. No, somebody please.
Mac.
Everybody wants somebody to listen to me.
Go on now, move along, please. There is a thing here to move along. Please, move along. Please, it's okay now, you're gonna be all right. We're gonna help you.
Isn't there anybody left? Nobody.
You're gonna be all right.
Nobody.
Now go on, break it up. There's a thing here to say. Go on.
Nobody. Nobody. Oh, God. God.
Mr. Paul Rayton, a dealer in fantasy, who sits in the rubble of his own making and imagines that he's the last man on earth, doomed to a perdition of unutterable loneliness, because a practical joke has turned into a nightmare. Mr. Paul Rayton, pallbearer at a funeral that he manufactured himself in the Twilight Zone.
That is very poetic. Pallbearer of a funeral that he orchestrated himself. Wow. Wow. Okay. So, what was, and I hope you got, so what was the bubble that he was in? What was the bubble that he was in at the beginning of the scene? Sheol. Right, because of what? Because of what? Self-pity, brooding over slights or past wrongs. Okay, good. So he was in Sheol. What was? So he was in the Sheol bubble at the beginning. What did he try to do with the other three people? What did he want? If everything happened the way he wanted it to happen, what did he want? You said what? Revenge. Revenge, yes. But in particular, in reference to what we were talking about, in reference to the bubble, what was he trying to do? In reference to the paradigm we looked at. He was trying to pull them into his bubble. And notice what I'm saying is that the only thing you care about is your life. The only thing that you know that's important to you, because that was what was important to him. So he was trying to pull them into his bubble, and basically wanted him to adapt to this world. And then at the end, what bubble was he in at the end? Leakness, right?
Alone in his own brain.
Alone in his own brain. So he created his own. He could, you could even say he was in Gina at the end. You know, the punishment. You know, so he basically brought himself, the punishment he was trying to inflict on someone else, he actually was in that bubble himself. And that's very, so like, be aware of that just in our everyday lives, because that is such a good example of, particularly when people are in negative states. You know, it's like, oh, the misery loves company. That really is true. From a theological perspective, it's like that. When someone's in that bubble, they want you to join them there. They want you to join them there. Because they want the world to be just like, they want the world to be aligned with how they're perceived. So keep that in mind, particularly as we go through this and as we look at the higher part of the scale.
When we were even in your everyday world, when you go to work, people, if they're not happy with the boss, they want you to not be happy. They want to bring you in. So
into their reality. That's right. Okay, so, we should know this now. So what does Jesus mean? Review. Jesus means, you gotta be kidding me.
Oh,
What does Jesus mean?
Oh, we
Okay. Divides from Yehoshua, the Lord saves, from Yeshua, salvation. We covered this last week. Salvation, rescue, deliverance. And we talked about that what did Jesus save us from? So Jesus saves us from what in one sense, these negative bubbles that we looked at last week. And so the essence of Jesus is deliverance. And what is Jesus rescuing us from? What is Jesus delivering us to? And Jesus saves us from the dangerous bubbles, from Sheol, from Gina, and returns us back to the unity and infinity of the Creator. Now we're going to talk about, we talked about this first part last week, that what we're saved from. And we're going to talk about what we're saved to, because really we have to have both of those things. Sometimes, we'll talk about that. But we have to know what we're saved from and what we're saved to. And sometimes we only focus on one or the other. So now, this is what does sin mean? We did a preview of this last week. Missing the mark. So let's talk about that a little bit in more depth. So it's derived from hata, the Hebrew word, which literally means to miss or to lose, or to miss or lose oneself. So to miss or to lose oneself is where the root of sin comes from. And when we talk about to miss or to lose, there's an implication there in this term, because when we say we're missing something, that means to miss something means that there is a target present. To lose something means that at one point it was we knew what it was or it was found. So there's a flip side of, if one can say, there's a flip side to sin. The literal word of sin implies something, positive on the other side. So it implies a prior discovery, found, at least an awareness of the target. So even in the word sin, the flip side of sin, the sin implies some hope, and that's what we want to talk about today. Is that the hope that is implicit in the word of sin. One thing that
what about, how do you think that there's lack of hope?
No. But when you so the word sin, the literal word sin. Let's just focus on the actual word today. So the word sin literally means to miss the mark. So when you're saying if something's missed the work, that means there is a target. It implies that there is a target that you can't hit. That's the flip side. If you say if sin also implies to lose something, that also implies that at one point you had it. So what I'm saying is that the word sin in the origin of it has a flip side of it, and the flip side is some hope. Because you can't miss something if there's no target, and you can't lose something if it was never found. So even the word sinning in and of itself implies hope. Now, so that's an important question. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the history of the church, and maybe we'll touch on this when we come back. We have two sides of that coin. So one, there's been a certain trend. When I say the church, I'm talking about the global church over 2,000 plus years. So all that together. There's one side of the church that focused on the sin, that focused on the fall, if you will, the ground where humanity fell to, and there was a other side of the church which focused on where humanity came from. So both of them are prevalent, but sometimes we have a tendency to focus on one or the other. But you can't talk about the fall of humanity or the fallen state. When you say a fallen state, it implies that at one point it was lifted up. So both of these are prevalent in the Christian tradition. We don't want to get into the reasons why certain churches focus on, theologically. That can be a long discussion, but generally speaking, well, I don't even want to make that generalization. So let's just say these are two aspects in the church, and both of them are the elevation and the groundedness, if you will. The elevation of where we came from, or where we're intended to be, and the groundedness in the sense of where we have fallen to. So that both of those are possibilities, and both of those are part of Christian theology.
Is it possible to have a mixture? A church to follow a mixture?
Oh yeah, true. Yeah, I mean that would be ideal, because that would be acknowledging both aspects of the theology.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so you cannot understand the theology of the religion of Jesus without understanding the anthropology of the religion of Jesus. In other words, when we talk about the Bible, when we talk about Christianity, we talk about the religion of Jesus, we're not just talking about how we understand God, but we're also talking about how we understand humanity. It's making bold claims about ourselves, it's making bold claims about humanity. So that's what we talk about with anthropology. So it's both theology and it's anthropology. The anthropology that the religion of Jesus is firmly grounded in is humanity's natural state or original state is in union with God. And this is what we talk about when we say humanity is in a fallen state. That implies that at one point humanity was elevated. So the anthropology is that humanity's natural state, humanity's destined state, original state is to be in union with God. That is what we're supposed to be. That's what we're destined to be. So our full humanity is found in the divine. It's found in the divine. So this is the anthropology that is just as important. It's just as significant as the theology. When we talk about the religion of Jesus. We're good? Okay, so we see this from the very beginning. This is why the Genesis narrative is so important. And, we see in the beginning the Creator made Adam, made humanity in the Creator's image. The Creator, Adam, began in union. Garden is the place of union. So the garden is a place of union. Unity is broken. Exit the garden. And so this is starting off. We don't start out in a sinful state. We start out in a state of in union with God. That's the message of anthropology that the narrative is talking. So humanity and the Creator start out in union, and that's where we were supposed to be. Now this is what's going to transition us. What realm? Focusing on our chart, focusing on the realm of consciousness last week. What realm would the Garden of Eden correspond to loosely. I mean, now we're getting hot, we're getting very metaphysical here. But what realm would the Garden of Eden correspond to using our chart below? So we have the celestial, intermediate, terrestrial, Sheol, and Gina. What realm would the Garden of Eden best correspond to? Celestial? Okay. So we have celestial. Any other things? Terrestrial? Okay. We have terrestrial, we have celestial. Let's just do a vote. Okay, so let's start again. How many say celestial? Okay. How many say intermediate? How many say terrestrial? I hope we don't say Sheol. Put that in the money. If we start there, we're in a bad state, okay? Now, the garden, like I said, this is very metaphysical. This is a lot of the Garden of Eden would best correspond to this intermediate state. The intermediate state in the sense that when we talk about celestial state, we're talking about we're talking about a radical otherness. The Garden of Eden represents a place where humanity and God have a common ground. And I don't want to get too esoteric, with it. Some people would say that that humanity, that Adam had the ability to ascend to the celestial realm, but the Garden of Eden would be more in the intermediate state. And hopefully, that would be probably by the time we look at that. So if we say that exiting the Garden of Eden really brought humanity down to this state, back to terrestrial state. So Albert Einstein said no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So if we think about that, if you gotta remember, so if we're having issues, we're having difficulty in the terrestrial realm, and we try to solve the problem with a terrestrial consciousness. Instead of opening ourselves, like we talked about the dream past, opening ourselves up to viewing the world in a way that in a vision, viewing the world through images, through parables, through basically this we're talking about that intermediate way, that in between way in which the divine can commune with us. And definitely we don't want to try to solve a terrestrial problem by going lower, which some people do, because some people, when they have a problem, what they do, they get depressed. They get mad, or they lash out at people. So you're basically trying to solve a problem with a lower level of consciousness than where the problem exists. So I think that's a good way to kind of transition into what we're going to talk about today, as far as the intermediate state. So no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So just to review before we get our assignment. So the celestial, when we talk about celestial state of consciousness or celestial realm, is the otherness of God. My thoughts are higher than your thoughts. My ways are higher than your ways. The otherness, that transcendent aspect of God, that transcendent realm. The intermediate state, the state of dreams, of visions, of parabolic language. So relating to God, this essentially would be, this is the otherness of God, and the otherness of God is being translated into images, parables, visions, or dreams that we can relate to. So it's still higher than the terrestrial realm, but it's literally an intermediate state. It's a translation into more relatable terms of the celestial realm, because celestial realm is a whole other language. And hopefully that'll be more apparent when we talk about the scriptures at the end. Terrestrial, we talk about that, empirical 5 senses. Sheol, the place of the dead, place of greatness, a place of not a place of lack of hope. Gina is a place of punishment. So punishment, Sheol, lack of hope. Terrestrial, empirical, 5 senses, intermediate, visions, dreams, and celestial, the transcendent nature of God. So you were so eager to get to this last week, so now we're going to fill the time for it. Okay. So identify as many of these as you can get through. Identify the bubbles in these passages, and you can use any of the bubbles you want from any of these. But identify them. But I want you to focus. Well, no, any of them you want. I just want you to identify as many bubbles in each passage as you can. So starting with Genesis and going down in that order. And I'll give you a few moments, and then we'll do the remaining ones together. So Genesis, first one is Genesis 37, 5 through 11. Luke, second chapter, 41 through 52. Third passage is Mark 10, 13 through 16. 1 Thessalonians 4, 1 through 12. Revelations 4, 1 through 3. Identify the bubbles in the passages. And just a hint, Genesis and Luke passages are connected. You should see a connection there.